you can see how it's an isolated location. All right, it comes up out of the desert on its own, and so it's a perfect stronghold. One of the things that makes it effective as a stronghold is obviously it's not very accessible. So, however, to get up there and stay up there for any length of time, you've got to have infrastructure to support yourself, whether you're 2 people or 200. So Herod, we talked about him being as hated as he was. He needed to have a refuge or a retreat that he could get away from people if they decided to ever rise up and revolt over him. So Herod being Herod, instead of just building a little fisherman's shack on top and a few, a few barrels of grain and some water, he constructs an elaborate mountaintop fortress. Very elaborate, very mountaintop. And the palace is on different ends of the top up there. There's a defensive wall built around the top. So when you look at Masada, you got to think of several different eras that make this a historical site. There are some scholars who say, and I'm inclined to believe them, but this is total theory. Okay, so it's not in the Bible, but it says when David and his men went down to the stronghold, the reference to stronghold is Masada, because it's the more we've learned about the land and have completely geographically mapped all of these types of locations, this is the one that makes the most sense because it's close to En-Gedi, a known David site. We just were there a minute ago, and David would not necessarily have fortified this position. It would have just been a place of refuge for a little while where his men could rest and recuperate and relax, to just get a good night's sleep while being hunted by their enemies. So you wouldn't have pitched camp up there. It's too isolated and too remote, but you could have hidden up there for a few days. When you're a troop commander and you have troops in the field and you're on constant war, sometimes just a good night's sleep is what you need, and not be afraid of your enemies sneaking up on you. So anyway, starting the David era potential, right? Now we're moving into the certain, which is that Herod saw this location and thought that's a good fortress, a refuge for me to hide from in case, from the people in case something ever went down. So he builds the infrastructure, massive cistern network. We're going to see all this when we get up there. That's the next interesting thing about it. The third interesting thing, what makes it what it is and why this is a very famous site, was the great Jewish revolt. Remember when the Romans destroyed the temple in 70 AD? This was the last holdout of Jewish zealots after the revolt. And so they fled from Jerusalem, they came here, took their families, and climbed the mountain and took over the fortress and fortifications. And they held out against the Romans. Well, Rome, being what they're, I'm not going to give away too much, but Rome decides that's not acceptable, so we're going to go besiege that mountain. Right, so the storytelling begins, we'll continue as we go uphill. I just wanted you to see from a bird's eye view what you're about to go up so that you can orient yourself a little bit, okay?
Masada is a mountain, but it is also an historic episode that the talented historian and writer Josephus Flavius wrote about almost 2,000 years ago. His account contains all the elements of a fantastic drama in which Jews, Romans, and idealists fight to the death. It's no wonder that Hollywood jumped at the opportunity to tell this fascinating story. With an impressive set and thousands of extras, they created a colossal film featuring the rebel leader Eleazar, son of Yair, and the Roman commander Flavius Silva in the leading roles. However, in the movie, unlike real life, no one really deals with the dilemmas or personal struggles, and certainly not with the more problematic aspects of the story. Then where should we start our story? We could start with the Hasmoneans, who were the first to discover the advantages of this isolated cliff in the heart of the desert. Or we could start at the end, with a dramatic project of the Masada excavations, with Igal Yadin, the head of the excavation team, who would stand on the mountain and read Josephus Flavius' description of the account, and everyone around him could actually hear the echoes of the fighting. Or we could start the quest with King Herod. Herod, who ruled under the auspices of the Romans, built himself a magnificent fortress here on the mountain, which was to be his sanctuary in troubled times. And believe me, he really had troubles. Herod, like any other king, built his palaces to the highest standards of his day. One of them is this Western palace. Herod's architect was probably a short guy. Here he built himself a bathhouse, and he would put his lamp here and enter his bath. What can I tell you? This king loved the good life. Until now, we spoke about Herod. It wasn't the splendor of Herod's style that made Masada what it is today. The year is 66 AD. The Jews rebel against the Roman Empire. 4 years later, the temple is destroyed. Jerusalem falls. Everywhere else, the rebels were suppressed. Masada is the last stronghold where there are still Jewish rebels. And believe me, they didn't need Herod's palaces. The rooms in the wall were divided and used as living quarters. They lived from food in the storerooms, and they drank water from the cisterns, kindly left behind by Herod long ago.
Right from the beginning of the excavations, signs of the rebels were found elsewhere, in the palaces, in the ritual baths, and in particular in the wall. The deepest experience I went through in Masada was when they found in this particular room the first piece of scroll. To see Hebrew letters coming out of the ground, the same letters which are used until today. Later, more fragments of scrolls were found. One I found with my own hands, but the first experience is unforgettable.
Throughout the revolt, groups of refugees sought asylum on the mountain. About 1,000 rebels.
Welcome to Masada National Park.
Relatively. It's no, I mean, I like that. Oh, I see. Even niet geweest?
Begin?
Even niet geweest?
Ja, dat heb ik niet geweest. Ik heb het eerste jaar niet zo. Was zo'n klein jaar geleden.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we get to walk. You know, you can like take your shirt off or your bra.
Please be careful of the automatic doors. We hope you enjoy your visit.
Manual tasks and manual labor would have gone to the soldiers because, like we talked about, you need to keep them occupied or they get into trouble. I want you to quick those. We're going to see more of it in a minute, but come to the edge and look over. See if you can. There's be a better one over there. You can see the remains of the old Roman camps that were built. You can see that's untouched. I mean, that's the original Roman camp there. There's numerous ones around the mountain, and they built a giant wall. We'll talk about that in a minute, but just want you to see on this side first before we go further. That square that's down there, and below it is a wall. So have a look if you can. There's better. It's the same mentality. Why would they build this giant siege wall around the mountain? The people are up here. Even if they could all make it out in a rush, I mean, surely you could stop them. Again, you're looking for things for your troops to do. They're stuck out here in the desert for a very long time, and commanders walking around going, "All right, boys, let's start stacking rocks." So that's their day, is stacking rocks. and they built a 360-degree wall around the entire thing. It goes on the ridge over there, up and down. I mean, it's an incredible feat of just manual labor engineering that the Roman soldiers did. But anyway, that being said, that's during the siege much later. So the complex you're going to be walking through, you're going to see the storage rooms, you're going to see Herod's palace. That's what's all going on up here to properly grasp what he was able to accomplish with his architecture. And we don't even know that he ever actually came here. That's the thing. It's possible he never stepped foot on this mountaintop. So.
Kind of like Camp David.
Right, yeah.
Some presidents never make it there.
All of the shouts of orders and the military activity, and then of course the last night of the siege, after the Romans were able to breach through the barricade, they went back to that camp and had a massive party. So the families are sitting up here watching this, knowing that their impending doom is coming, and they're listening to their enemy celebrate down there. So yeah, right across on that side. And now the water path I told you about, see how that road kind of goes that direction?
Oh, yeah.
And Getty is look to the farthest ridge and down. You see those like a line of trees. That's the oasis of En-Gedi. So another reason why we think this is potentially a David stronghold, because look how close he is to a known David point, which is En-Gedi. So he's they can get their water there. They can load up provisions, supplies, and then they can make their way, climb up here, get a few good nights rest, which is really, it's worth hiking up here just to get that at that kind of time. And so, but then flash forward to the Roman army time, they had, and I don't remember exactly how many liters a day it was. I don't know how many thousand, but they had to bring X thousand liters a day of water from the spring at En-Gedi all the way to Masada for the Roman army that's besieging the people up here. How much water did the people up here have to haul from En-Gedi?
They had it in storage.
Yep, zero. They had to haul no water, and they could have been up here indefinitely. Because what we'll see in a minute is Herod designed, again, the mad genius that he was, designed an ingenious system of underground aqueducts and pipes that brought water to cisterns and that kept them permanently filled on a recyclable basis. It's just stunning. So we'll go learn about that in a minute, but that's why I think there's a private little victory that people must have had looking down and seeing this caravan of Roman soldiers having to hike across the blistering heat of the desert to get water and come back again when they've got all they could use up here. So.
By the way, small anecdote.
Tower, you're pulling that thing up to make it even with this wall so that you can then use a battering ram. Does that make sense? So it's not just guys running up and climbing and trying to withstand arrows. They have to haul a siege tower the whole way up. I mean, that would have been something I'd love to go back in history and watch. But they pull this thing up, and the tower comes eye level with the defenders, and they start smashing it with the battering ram. So this is where where the wood caught on fire as part of the gate, and they had to smash through it. So anyway, this is eroded a good bit, since that time, but it's still largely intact. If you walk down this, sometimes we bring groups up and we walk down to that side and drive away at that direction. But there's still fragments of wood and construction materials in that siege ramp that you can see sticking out, planks and that kind of thing. So the siege ramp is built, and that's not built, or it's built by not by the soldiers. It's built by Jewish slaves, and that's why people ask, why can't they just throw rocks down on them and stop them? It's because they had their countrymen building the siege ramp, and they wouldn't kill their own countrymen. So that's why they're able to just inevitably watch their fate creeping up on them the whole time. So.
And these are probably the prisoners of war, if you can call it so, of the same people that captured in Jerusalem 3 years before or 4 years before.
So yeah.
How long was this battle?
No, right here. This was this.
So this all it all came up
high,
this high.
It was higher, but the tower itself. So you would have the ramp, but they pull the tower up, and the tower.
The tower was up this
and
high.
The tower came eye level with you. So it is a massive. I mean, it's a huge.
Yeah, it had to be.
Undertaking. So the tower comes up, and they smack it with the battering ram, pop, 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 and then that's how they. But instead of bursting in the city, smiting everyone, what they decide to do is they go back and celebrate in the officers' camp. And they should have gone through if they wanted any kind of victory, because that was the night that people decided, no, we're going to commit suicide before we give them the spoils of war here. So that was a very fascinating night when that happened. Yeah, super.